long before the breaking news alerts on our phones, before the 24/7 news channels filling our homes with constant updates, before viral clips raced across Instagram and YouTube, and long before that one Facebook post from a relative could shift an entire family's opinion. There was a world where information moved slowly, hand to hand, voice to voice, story to story. The first reporters were hunters returning with news of distant lands. The first writers were elders who remembered every detail of battles, storms, and miracles. The first messengers were travelers who carried stories from one village to another, their words shaping how entire tribes understood the world. These were the earliest architects of perception, the one who learned that a story is more than entertainment. It is direction, it is instruction, it is power. Tonight, we will explore the true origin of media and its influence, from its humble beginnings to the vast empire it has become today. We'll discover why humans have always depended on stories for survival, guidance, and connection, and how those same stories were reshaped, altered, and manipulated by those seeking power. Together we'll trace how media evolved into a force capable of shaping human minds, steering opinions, and molding our very perspective of reality. And by the end of this journey, you will look at the information around you with a deeper, clearer, and entirely new understanding. If put in simple words, media is any system that carries messages to groups. By that definition, a shout from a hilltop, a rumor spreading through a village, a legend passed down for generations, or a tale shared by elders, all qualify as early forms of media. The only difference was scale. In fact, gossiping itself can be considered the earliest form of media. Gossip was humanity's first news. Primitive tribes used it to share dangers, expose wrongdoing, announce alliances, judge social behavior, form group identity, and manage conflict. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar even suggests that gossip replaced grooming when human groups became too large, meaning humans needed a social tool to maintain trust and cohesion. In essence, gossip served the same function as today's newspapers, alerts, scandals, and public opinion shaping, because gossip created reputations, influencing who led, who followed, who was trusted, and who was feared. That is media. But as tribes grew into settlements, and settlements became cities, this intimate circle of storytellers could no longer reach everyone who needed to hear the news. Larger populations required faster, wider communication. And so the first organized messengers emerged, the heralds of Egypt and Greece announcing royal commands, the Persian couriers racing across vast deserts, the Inca Shaskis sprinting through mountain trails, the Chinese imperial envoys delivering orders recorded in ancient texts, the Indian dutas described in the Ramayana and Arthashastra, and even the Greek hemerodromoi carrying urgent military news. All of these early messenger systems were born from the same ancient need that once fueled tribal gossip, the need for humans to share dangers, spread knowledge, build alliances, and shape collective understanding. What began as whispers around a fire eventually scaled into the first true networks of mass communication, laying the groundwork for the media systems that would one day shape entire civilizations. As human communities expanded and the need for reliable communication grew, Spoken stories and traveling messengers were no longer enough. People needed a way to store information beyond memory, a way for messages to outlive the messenger. And so, long before any epic was inscribed, the first writing systems appeared. Sumerian cuneiform pressed into clay, Egyptian hieroglyphics carved into temple walls, early scripts on seals in the Indus Valley. These were the earliest attempts to freeze knowledge in time, the first true media artifacts. From tax records to royal decrees, from laws to myths, writing became the new messenger. And out of this revolution in communication emerged one of humanity's oldest surviving stories, the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale that marks the moment when storytelling transformed from a voice around a fire into a permanent record, preserved for generations. But before we move forward in time, let's pause for a moment. Because these early developments, gossip around the fire, wandering messengers, the first carved symbols on clay, did more than spread information. They changed human behavior. They rewired how we think, how we judge, how we trust, and how we fear. Long before modern media, humans were already responding to the same psychological triggers we respond to today. Curiosity, fear of missing information, the need to belong, the desire to be in the know, the urge to shape reputation, ours and others. When tribes whispered stories around the fire, it did more than entertain. It shaped behavior. A rumor could elevate someone to hero or destroy them overnight. Early humans survived by paying attention to social information. A simple warning like, "Don't trust him. He stole food," could influence alliances, leadership, even safety. Gossip became the first psychological weapon. Subtle, emotional, invisible, yet powerful enough to alter destinies. As tribes grew into kingdoms, messengers carried truth through marketplaces and courts. A king could declare, "The enemy approaches," and 1,000 minds are shifted instantly. Even if the enemy never existed, another ruler could claim divine favor, and people bowed because the message felt official and undeniable. History began bending not around facts, but around whoever carried the loudest story. When writing emerged, influence expanded. In Sumer, a king could engrave victory on stone, even if he barely won, and generations accepted it as truth. Pharaohs carved myths of divine ancestry to secure unquestioned authority. Across early civilizations, symbols recorded achievements, but also curated beliefs shaping loyalty and obedience. Stories were no longer entertainment, they became tools of power and persuasion. A Sumerian king once altered a narrative to justify war, claiming the gods commanded him to restore order. His people marched with conviction, unaware they were serving politics, not divinity. A story changed a nation, and centuries later, we still do the same. Only now, the stone tablets have become screens. As the ancient world expanded and populations grew, the old ways of sharing information, carved stones, handwritten scrolls, shouted proclamations, could no longer keep pace with humanity's rising voice. And so early press-like systems emerged, with scribes in Europe copying text by hand, Chinese artisans carving whole pages into wooden blocks, and record keepers, criers, priests, and stone carvers becoming the first guardians of information. But everything changed in the mid-1400s when Johannes Gutenberg, a goldsmith from Mainz, created the first movable type printing press, combining metalwork, oil-based ink, and the mechanics of a wine press to make books affordable and knowledge accessible. His 1455 Gutenberg Bible revealed something the world had never seen before. Information could now travel faster than armies. The press reshaped societies as newspaper appeared in the 1600s, allowing ordinary citizens to read war updates, market prices, scandals, foreign events, and soon the printed word began to drive revolutions. Martin Luther's 95 Theses spread across Europe in weeks, sparking the Reformation, while revolutionary pamphlets in America and France became the first viral content, igniting collective action. But the power of printing brought manipulation too. Forged letters printed in Italy claimed the Pope supported political factions, triggering riots. Pamphlets in 1649, England portrayed King Charles I as a tyrant, shifting public opinion so dramatically that he lost not only support but his life. And rulers across the world created lists of banned books, imprisoning printers because they understood that controlling the press meant controlling the people. The printing press altered human behavior, teaching societies to question authority, compare ideas, and form opinions independent of kings. For the first time, knowledge became a shared resource, spreading without permission, multiplying minds across continents. What began as a tool for copying words became a force that rewired how people thought, believed, feared, and acted. And slowly, quietly, the world awakened. I hope you've been enjoying this journey so far, seeing how humans shape media and how media quietly shaped us in return. Now we're about to step into the world of modern media and its extraordinary influence. But before we continue, tell me, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there tonight? And if these peaceful stories about power, money, and influence are helping you drift into deeper understanding and rest, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Empire of Sleep so you never miss a new story. Now, let's continue. As the world stepped into the modern age, the hunger for faster information didn't slow down. It intensified. The printing press had multiplied ideas, but people wanted something even quicker. Something that could outrun horses and ships. Something that could cross mountains and oceans in moments. And so humanity opened the door to a new era of communication, the age of the telegraph and the rise of radio. The telegraph, born in the early 1800s through the work of Samuel Morse and others, was humanity's first attempt to send thoughts faster than physical movement. For the first time in history, a message could travel miles in seconds. Little pulses of electricity racing across wires, carrying hope, fear, warnings, victories. Before the telegraph, news traveled at the speed of the fastest animal alive. After the telegraph, it traveled at the speed of light. Newspapers, once the kings of slow but powerful mass communication, suddenly became synchronized with time itself. Editors began printing updates the moment the telegraph operator tapped a message through. Wars were reported in hours instead of months. Stock markets moved in real time. Empires governed with tighter control because distance no longer diluted information. Public reaction was awe mixed with suspicion. One 19th century writer compared the telegraph to a nerve system stretching across the earth, as if the planet had suddenly grown a living consciousness. People marveled at how a simple tap of a finger could move an empire. But some feared it too, whispering that such speed could ruin society, that humans weren't meant to know so much so quickly. And in a way, they were right. The telegraph didn't just change the pace of information, it changed the psychology of entire nations. It created urgency. It created expectation. It gave birth to the idea of breaking news, that stories should arrive instantly, that events must be consumed as they happen. It was the ancestor of every push notification we receive today. But the story didn't stop there. As telegraph wires wrapped around the earth like a metallic web, another invention quietly prepared to change human consciousness even more deeply: the radio. The radio was the first medium to capture not just information but emotion. A message could now have a voice, tone, warmth, fear, passion. Everything carried across invisible airwaves straight into people's homes. Its origin stretches back to experiments by James Clerk Maxwell, Heinrich Hertz, and later Guglielmo Marconi, who proved that wireless communication was not magic, but science. By the early 1900s, radio signals began to leap across continents. When the first radio broadcasts crackled through speakers, entire families gathered around a wooden box glowing softly in the dark, hearing, often for the first time, voices from distant places. It felt supernatural, like the world had learned to whisper. The psychological impact was immediate and massive. People who had never traveled beyond their village now felt part of a nation, part of a shared emotional experience. Radio unified societies. It also controlled them. During wars, radio became a weapon of influence. Governments understood that winning minds was as important as winning battles. A calm voice could steady a terrified nation. A fiery voice could ignite millions. One tale often told from the 1930s is that of a radio show in America, Orson Welles' dramatic broadcast of the War of the Worlds. Though meant as fiction, it sounded so real that thousands believed Earth was truly being invaded by Martians. People ran into the streets. Some prayed. Some fled. Some called the police. All because of a voice carried through the air. Such is the power of media when it meets the human imagination. Meanwhile, in other parts of the world, radio shaped politics. Leaders rose to power through charisma alone, their voices becoming trusted companions inside millions of homes. A single speech could lift spirits or crush them. A single rumor spread on radio could alter public opinion overnight. Newspapers, telegraphs, and radio together formed the triad of early modern mass media, each reinforcing the other. The telegraph brought speed, newspapers brought detail, radio brought emotion, and humanity changed with them. People began to react faster, think faster, feel collectively. Stories no longer waited for the next sunrise. They traveled at the speed of electricity, shaping beliefs in real time. For the first time, humanity did not just read the world, it listened to it. And with each invention, the invisible force we now call media influence grew stronger, deeper, more intimate, preparing the world for the next great leap, the age of screens. But before we step into the bright glow of television, we need to pause once again. because something subtle, powerful, and deeply human was happening during the age of newspapers, telegraphs, and radio. A psychological shift, one that would prepare the world for every screen that came after. For the first time in history, people began to feel pulled toward information. Not just interested, not just curious, but hooked. News was no longer a slow visitor arriving with the seasons. It became a constant presence, a river that never stopped flowing. And humans, wired by evolution to watch for danger, opportunity, and change, began checking newspapers the way early tribes once checked the horizon for threats. The telegraph heightened this instinct even further. Suddenly, information traveled so fast that people felt compelled to keep up. A war in another country seemed to occur right outside one's window. A financial panic far away could shake people's confidence at home. The world felt closer, more urgent, more alive. And with radio, the pull grew stronger still. Voices carried emotion across the airwaves. Fear, excitement, hope, authority. People didn't just read the news anymore, they felt it. Families rearranged their evenings around scheduled broadcasts. Citizens waited anxiously for speeches, updates, alerts, music, stories. For the first time, information wasn't silent. It had personality. It had tone. It had power. And slowly, without realizing it, humanity formed a new habit. The habit of seeking updates. Journalists, editors, broadcasters, they began to notice something. Certain stories spread faster. Certain headlines moved e-papers. Certain tones kept listeners frozen in place. They didn't call it virality then, but they understood it. They understood that fear travels, conflict spreads, novelty grabs attention, emotion makes stories memorable, repetition builds belief. When newspapers saw that dramatic headlines sold more copies, they printed more drama. When radio hosts realized suspense held listeners longer, they shaped their shows around tension. When telegraph newsrooms discovered that updates could arrive minute by minute, they created urgency, and urgency created addiction. One editor in New York famously said in the late 1800s, "Give people what makes their hearts pound, and they will return tomorrow asking for more." And they did. People returned every day, every morning, every evening, hungry for another taste of the world, hungry for the next story, hungry for the next update. This was the birth of a new psychological relationship. Not just between people and information, but between people and the feeling that information created. Excitement, fear, anticipation, belonging, outrage, curiosity. The mediums were simple, but the emotions were ancient. And those who delivered the news began shaping narratives not only to inform, but to capture attention. Stories became sharper. Headlines became louder. Voices became more dramatic. Events became spectacles. And in that transformation, the world unknowingly stepped into a new era, where information would not just be consumed, but chased, where media would not just report reality, but influence it, where attention would become a currency, long before anyone had a name for it. The seeds of the attention economy, the very one that rules our digital world today, were already planted in the age of the telegraph, newspapers, and radio. Humanity had tasted instant information, and once it tasted it, it wanted more. This hunger, this psychological shift, this quiet addiction, was the doorway to the next great transformation, the age of television, when influence would stop being just heard and begin being seen. And then, just as humanity was adjusting to the speed of wires and the intimacy of voices carried on radio waves, a new invention arrived, quietly at first, but destined to change the human mind more deeply than any medium before it. Television. For centuries, people had imagined distant events in their minds. They pictured battles from newspaper descriptions, leaders from written speeches, and breaking news from the sound of broadcast voices. But television removed imagination from the equation. For the first time in history, the world could be seen without being visited. And this changed everything. Television was born in fragments, in early experiments by Paul Nipkow in Germany, Philo Farnsworth in America, John Logie Baird in Scotland, each one inching closer to capturing moving images and sending them through the air. By the 1930s and 40s, television screens flickered to life in living rooms across the world. Families gathered around these glowing boxes the way ancient tribes once gathered around firelight, watching faces and stories that felt almost magical. And with pictures came a new kind of truth, a truth that bypassed logic and went straight into the emotions. If you saw it, you believed it. Television didn't ask people to imagine a war, it showed them one. Television didn't describe a leader's passion, it displayed every expression, every breath, every lie. Television didn't ask citizens to trust the news, it made the news feel real. The psychological impact was immediate and overwhelming. Humans trust their eyes more than any other sense, and now a glowing screen had become their second pair of eyes. Television blurred the line between reality and narrative, and it made distant events feel personal, local dramas feel national, and small stories feel monumental. One tale, the night television became more powerful than politics. In 1960, the first televised US presidential debate took place between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Radio listeners thought Nixon won. His arguments were sharper, his tone stronger. But television viewers saw something else. Kennedy looked calm, confident, composed. Nixon, pale and sweating, looked uneasy, untrustworthy, nervous. And just like that, appearance outweighed argument. A screen, not a speech, shaped public perception. Kennedy's victory in the debate wasn't due to words, but to images. Television had revealed its true power. It didn't just report reality. It created it. Another tale, the Vietnam War, the first televised war. When footage of the Vietnam War appeared on television, homes across America saw the brutality of conflict more vividly than any newspaper or radio broadcast could express. Seeing soldiers march, hearing bombs fall, watching young men cry or collapse, this reshaped public opinion. Protests grew, support shifted. Television didn't choose sides, but emotion did, because people saw suffering, not strategy. For the first time, a war was lost, not on the battlefield, but in living rooms. The new psychology of television tapped into ancient human instincts. We trust what we see. Faces influence us more than facts. Repetition becomes reality. Moving images override memory. Emotion spreads faster when witnessed, not imagined. Advertisers understood this immediately. So did politicians. So did governments. Television taught the world. what to desire, whom to admire, whom to distrust, what to celebrate, what to fear. And millions followed without question, not because they were foolish, but because the human brain is wired to believe its eyes. Television didn't just change media, it changed culture, politics, fashion, war, identity, and the way humans processed information. Television became the new storyteller, the new teacher, the new memory maker, and slowly, quietly, power moved again, away from printing presses and newsrooms, into the hands of those who controlled the images on the screen. Because with television, the world learned a profound truth. If you can shape what people see, you can shape what they believe. And if you can shape belief, you can shape the future. Today, there are hundreds of news channels in America and thousands more across the world, all broadcasting, competing, and fighting for the same thing: your attention. In the early days, television tried to keep its purity, its noble intention of simply showing the world as it was. For a brief moment in history, TV genuinely aimed to be a window to reality, raw, honest, unfiltered. But that purity lasted only until advertising arrived. Because the moment ads entered the frame, television changed. Media and advertising merged into one ecosystem, inseparable, synonymous. What began as a mission to inform slowly evolved into a contest to captivate. Because captivating viewers meant selling more ads, and selling more ads meant survival. What once merely funded programming soon began steering it. Advertisers realized television didn't just reach people, it shaped them. It shaped desires, fears, habits, beliefs. Gradually, media drifted from reporting reality to crafting a version of reality designed to hold attention while keeping advertisers comfortable. And as competition intensified, sensationalism quietly took center stage. Calm, thoughtful reporting couldn't keep viewers glued to the screen, but fear could, outrage could, drama could. So headlines became louder, stories darker, pacing faster. News turned into spectacle. Reality was no longer simply shown. It was staged, sharpened, heightened, to attract as many eyes as possible. With networks controlling the lens and advertisers controlling the tone, people became more vulnerable than ever. They trusted what they saw on the screen, the anchors, the polished images, the nightly narratives, without realizing these were curated truths, packaged for ratings and profit. Slowly humans began reacting not to the world as it was, but to the world as television presented it. As one critic famously said, television does not reflect the world, it defines it. What began as a pure window became a powerful mirror, shaping how societies felt, feared, argued, desired, and understood reality. Influence was no longer a whisper or a printed word, it was an image, sharp, glowing, undeniable. And those who controlled the image controlled the narrative. And those who controlled the narrative controlled the mind. I hope you've been enjoying the story so far, seeing how humans shaped media and how media quietly shaped us in return. Now we're about to step into the world of social media and its powerful influence. But before we continue, tell me, which part of the world are you listening from? And what time is it there tonight? And if these peaceful stories about power, money, and influence help you learn and unwind, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Empire of Sleep so you never miss an episode. Now, let's continue. For decades, television ruled as the undisputed king of media and influence. It decided what we saw, what we believed, and how we felt. But then came the internet. And suddenly, anyone could publish a message, a photo, or a story and reach millions. For the first time, the world witnessed a version of reality that was raw, immediate, and unpolished. A reality television could never fully reveal. Television still exists today, but its throne is fading. People have grown tired of watching more advertisements than news, and of news that feels louder, sharper, and more sensational than truthful. The internet offered something different. And then social media arrived, bringing not just information, but interaction. Now we could like, dislike, share, comment, or react with emotion to anything we saw or heard. For the first time in history, the audience had a voice, and the power to influence the story itself. If the internet was a revolution, social media was an earthquake. Platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and later TikTok did something no newspaper, no radio, no television ever could. They turned every person into both consumer and creator. But beneath the excitement, beneath the endless posting and scrolling, something invisible operates in the background. Algorithms. Silent, unseen, constantly learning, constantly observing, constantly predicting. At first, they seem harmless, simple tools designed to show us more of what we like. But quickly, these algorithms become the new gatekeepers, more powerful than any editor who ever sat behind a television desk. They decide what you see, what you do not see, what goes viral, what disappears, what outrages you, what comforts you, what you believe, and what you never question. And unlike humans, algorithms have no morals, no ethics, no boundaries. They want only one thing: your attention. Because attention means engagement. Engagement means time spent. Time spent means money earned. And so the digital world reshapes itself, not around truth, not around wisdom, not around insight, but around whatever keeps you watching. If you pause on anger, you are shown more anger. If you linger on beauty, you are shown more beauty. If you click on conspiracy, you are fed more conspiracy. If conflict keeps you scrolling, conflict becomes your reality. Humanity enters the era of psychic customization. Each person living inside their own personalized information universe, crafted by algorithms that understand them better than they understand themselves. Virality becomes a new currency. Speed replaces accuracy. Emotion replaces reason. Influence becomes instantaneous. A rumor circles the world in minutes. A lie reaches millions before truth wakes up. Movements rise, collapse, reshape society, all from a single post. Social media doesn't just change behavior, it engineers it. It doesn't just reflect human psychology, it rewrites it. As social media spreads across the world, a quieter transformation unfolds beneath the surface. For the first time in history, your mind becomes measurable, your choices predictable, your behavior profitable. This is the age of data. It begins harmlessly, a like, a swipe, a search. But every action becomes a footprint, revealing what excites you, scares you, comforts you, or keeps you watching. The age of information is ending. The age of behavioral influence has begun. Algorithms guide our attention, ads shape our desires, and every scroll pulls us into a narrative designed for us, not necessarily for our growth or our truth. And that is why awareness matters. A quiet, steady awareness that reminds us to question what we see, to notice who is shaping the story, and to understand why it's being told. Awareness protects us. Awareness keeps us from losing ourselves in a world built to capture our attention. Thank you for staying with me through this journey across time, power, and influence. If this story helped you see the world a little more clearly, gently remember to like, share, and subscribe to Empire of Sleep, where we explore more soft, slow stories about power, money, and the forces shaping human destiny. And when you're ready, you can drift into the next chapter, another quiet journey waiting for you here in the Empire of Sleep. Good night.